When the system doesn't work, you got to learn how to work the system. You know, over the last year or so, there's been a real trend going on in New York State of local municipalities, towns and cities driving Albany more than Albany is driving them. The big stories where this is the most true has been ICE, data centers, and flock cameras. If you as an individual were to just start calling phone numbers in Albany and try to get a meeting with a high-level person in state government, it's never going to happen. And if it did, they're never going to listen to you. They're just going to blow you off. And political activists and organizers have always known this. They've known this for hundreds of years. The game is always, okay, how do we force them to listen to us anyway? Over the last year, there have been some really big successes for activists and organizers in New York State, and they've all followed the same playbook. Instead of starting at the top and trying to force Albany to make some sort of top-down change, they're starting at the bottom, making problems and causing trouble at the bottom, agitating at the bottom, and then hoping that their county, their city, their township, they turn around to Albany and say, hey, you got to fix this and get these crazy locals out of my hair. We saw this exact thing play out with ICE in New York State. After the assault on Minneapolis and the murders of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, local activists all throughout New York State started going to their town government and saying, hey, we're going to get ahead of this. We don't want our local cops working with ICE. We don't want our town budget to be used to do the federal government's job for them when it comes to immigration enforcement. We don't want our cops moonlighting as ICE agents. Your job is to solve local crime. Fucking go do that. This happened in Buffalo, in Cheektowaga, in Rochester, in Syracuse, but also in small towns in Cattaraugus County. And after a couple months of that, 2-3 months of that, boom, New York State outlawed 287G agreements. Now, does that go far enough? Absolutely not. But does it go somewhere? Yes, it does. The exact same playbook was executed over data centers. There was proposals to build data centers in the New York town of Alabama, and the New York town of Tonawanda, and the New York town of Messina, and in all of those towns, the locals started going to town board meetings and say, fuck no, don't do this. Those town and county governments started complaining to Albany, and Albany said, you know what? This is a systemic problem. This is playing out the same way in all these communities. People are mad about these data centers all for the same reason. And just this past week, it was announced that there's going to be a 1-year moratorium on building new data centers. The pretense is that the state needs a year for the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Power Authority to figure out what the rules are going to be about the use of water for cooling and the amount of electricity that these data centers are going to be allowed to suck off of the public grid. But in that year that there's this pause, some of these projects are just going to fizzle. Again, local activists spread out all over the state start creating problems in their town, in their city, in their county, and the towns and cities and counties turn it into a problem for the state, and the state will listen to them, even if they won't listen to you. And I'm starting to see the same thing happen with the flock cameras. People are starting to realize that the flock cameras don't actually reduce crime. Towns that get them don't have major reductions in crime. People are starting to see that the police only really use them, best case scenario, they use their flock cameras as multi-million-dollar fidget spinners and just start poking around in them when they're bored. Worst case scenario, they use them to stalk their girlfriends. But anyway, now we have the local loudmouth in every single little town in New York State starting to go to town halls and say, what the fuck are we doing with this? Why is this happening? Justify this money. And if things keep playing out the way that they've been playing out lately, we should expect that in a couple of months, the state will put some sort of regulations on these flock cameras. But the common criticism, and I think it's correct, I think it's fair, is that the New York State level ruling that comes down will always be the weakest, wishy-washiest, most meaningless version of the ruling that could happen. New York outlawed its 287G agreements, but it still has on the table a bill called New York for All that would put even more restrictions on local cops' collaboration with federal civil law enforcement. The moratorium on construction of data centers is only good for a year. You know, these are compromised, weak versions of what the local activists are actually asking for. Now, some people always say, yeah, but let's take the win that we can get right now and push for more serious legislation next year. I don't think that makes sense, right? Because the momentum usually dies out. Whatever you get the first round tends to be the only thing you get, which is why it's so important that you go big and so important that you go big from the start.